Hello there. My name is Swagbrowski, and I watched Little Amelie at the 50th Toronto International Film Festival on September 14th. This film was among the 8 animated features of the festival, and it was by far the strongest and most memorable film I saw in the entire lineup. Little Amelie, or the Character of Rain, is a perfect film adaptation. This film would only work if it was animated, for where Belgian novelist and titular character Amélie Nothomb described outlandish, celestial comparisons and distant philosophical observations from her childhood, this film grounds her development in a narrative that not only harkens on an even more meaningful resolution, but deserves to stand out as a separate entity. Splendid job to everyone who worked on this masterpiece, and I'm super stoked for it to release in North American and international theaters. I first heard of this film in the lineup for the festival season, but admittedly, I didn't pay much mind to it as I had with the Canadian Space Cadet or the Japanese Scarlet. Who was the Character of Rain in its title? Why is it called Little Amelie or the Character of Rain, not and? So I booked this film at the last minute upon hearing from my friend, and I was set to watch it the next day. I hadn't known that the directors of the film, Lian Chauhan and Maëlys Vilade, would attend my screening, and it turns out that they attended the 2 screenings before as well. Both creatives started out as storyboard artists on past films like The Little Prince and Long Way North. It was incredible to hear from the creative hands that were at the helm of originating and producing this adaptation. They were so passionate about their brainchild and what it meant to them. A few minutes after the screening, the auditorium had to be made vacant to prepare for the next film, but a small crowd of us stuck outside to discuss for longer, and I'm so grateful they took the time to chat with us directly. When I saw the film at the festival, Lian Chauhan, who pitched the movie in the first place, explained to us that he wanted to prioritize emotions within the film above its visual innovation, especially in a year where generative AI was rampant. However, I believe that he accomplished both things. I even told him myself. Not only had he secured an incredibly touching narrative that crosses ethnological barriers and reaches individuals of all ages, but he had also allowed the visuals to support the story in ways no other film can replicate. From the 7 years of Little Amelie's production, 5 years were spent on story development, and 14 months were spent on animation. This was an independent production with a budget of 9.5 million euros. Little Amelie was adapted from Amélie Nothomb's original novel, supposedly an autobiography, titled in English as The Character of Rain. I'm still going to leave the meaning of its title as a surprise. To further understand the internal psyche of Amelie within the film, I felt so inclined to learn more about her life and way of thinking, so I ordered the novel from my library and read it all. Throughout the next passages, I'm going to occasionally compare the novel to that of its film adaptation, because I think the differences are so interesting. At the age of 2 years and 6 months, Amelie is an incredibly endearing and curious kid, and my mother described my infancy to be very similar in character. That's why I was so empathetic to Amelie and her forays through life, and reacted so strongly if something bad were to happen to her. She's quite clever and mature for her age, and regards herself highly. Amelie is the narrator of this film. To present the duality of this fictionalized character, the film uses 2 child voice actors, one for the narrator Amelie, voiced by Louise Charpentier, and one for toddler Amelie, by Emmylou Holmes. I loved this choice. Not one sounds just like the other. Charpentier presents a grand curiosity and almost sounds like a mature scholar, and Holmes has such an adorable innocence, yet incredibly emotional capability when things go awry. It's so great to hear how they both go hand in hand, and their vocal performances really stuck with me after the screening. Coupled with how Amelie views herself as God reincarnate, her inner monologues feel like they come from a place of regality and are inherently religious, which is also supported by her visual point of view. In the film, her emotions sway the changes in weather and stasis, which is such an incredible use of pathetic fallacy, and I had effectively been intimidated by her character. On a related note, the Japanese setting arises the need to brace for earthquakes, as pointed out within the novel, but the film turns this visualization into a narrative device by showing that Amelie had been the true source, to hone in the idea that she really was some powerful, celestial force that must be reckoned with. While it's more frequent in the novel, the film occasionally harks to biblical imagery, and it strengthens the emotion and wonder all the more. The sequence near the sea was one of my favorite moments of the film, and it was conceptualized by Lian Cho-han even before the film had been pitched to studios. In the novel, Amélie recalls how she felt as if she could walk on water, and decided to walk all the way to Korea. In the film, Han had visualized her parting the sea like Moses, so that she could analyze the ocean's delicacies, which I actually favored more. The film succeeds at humanizing the narrative greatly by transcribing this 2-year-old as a grand, illustrative auteur, which sounded like a daunting task to bring to film. Amelie's way of description is not only charming and humorous, but prideful and meticulous, and I can feel Natham's influence from the original novel. The dialogue within the film is so memorable in being a heavy mixture of all things natural and things that sound so important and wise. To those who adored Bluey for its values and writing style, you would especially adore little Amelie. I love the characterization of her surrounding family members as well. In the original novel, the readers do not see her siblings in lifelike spectacle. The film characterizes her family more than a simple journal entry in that it highlights natural conversation and movement. It's especially apparent when you pay attention to how Amelie's siblings talk to each other. I know this is just a plus side in having a novel adapted to film. It's just done so well in this movie that you wouldn't have guessed it took from a novel if you didn't know already. The visual material is what propels the film so much because the screen is how we lay witness to these humanities in the first place. Each character has something to like about them, and you do lay witness to how they develop on the side of Amelie's tale. The character designs are deceivingly simple in their use of flat colors and attention to facial expression. Characters could be easily distinguished by color palettes and combinations. The characters' eyes are much larger than in real life, but still carry the human nuances that visualize what they feel and think about. The animators have such a rich understanding of human expression that made my viewing experience really heartening. The expressions are what shine in every single shot. When producing this film, the scriptwriters took multiple creative liberties in omitting or changing events that were recounted in the novel, and I'm glad they did so. All of these differences bettered the film for being viewed in a single sitting. The novel, regardless of its short length, resembled a series of refined journal entries with philosophical questions that the author's younger self had wondered. It also relates to future moments of her life, which made it also sound like a memoir. The novel was too broad to cover. Only so many principles had related to each other, so condensing its narrative was in the film's best interest. It was actually surprising to me that the novel was only intended to be read by older audiences. What the film did to broaden its audience, it certainly furthered the reach of this film and suited its concept. The overarching narrative of this film discusses the cycle of life and death. Especially considering the unique situation of Amelie's delayed infancy, Amelie finds herself close to death and strives to uncover what life is worth living around for. She ponders reasons as to why things happen the way they are, whose fault it is, and whether or not she's as powerful as she thinks she is. The one element that is one of the most different between the novel and its film was the way it handled its ending. The ending of a piece of work is what the audience would remember the most after finishing it. The topics covered by both novel and film adaptation are incredibly broad and mature to discuss, and it's ironic that they're especially mature when the protagonist nears the age of a toddler. I'm impressed that the film still had the guts to delve into discussing something so close and that relates to us all. Overall, I believe the film sends it off in a more satisfying and memorable light. I felt that all had clicked when I made it to the epilogue. The novel, on the other hand, ends on a more dismal and incomplete note. It elaborates on how Amelie viewed her own humanity and made many historical connections to warfare to be in parallel to what she went through. I wish the events retold in the movie were what happened in her real life instead. The ending felt so somber that I felt it negated what the film resolved to. I couldn't get myself to read the novel or think about the film for a few days because I had been so shaken by what actually happened. At the end of the day, it's hard to know if anything Amelie Nothomb recounted was a fact or fiction. The setting and time of the film is of great underlying importance, though not touched up until the third act. The Japanese setting is the canvas of this wonderful story. The belief that toddlers under the age of 3 were akin to gods was Japanese transcribed. The suburban and forest areas, which were the main locations visited in the film, are so beautiful and full of unique qualities that are greatly visualized and represented in the film. Each establishing shot is blooming with character and cultural delicacy and custom. I find the setting so integral to the film because it provides Amelie a home to confide in. She calls the backyard garden her shrine and sanctuary. It was part of her infant identity. In its original version, the film was entirely presented in the French language to keep the viewing experience simple. In the novel, Amelie actually communicated to Nishio-san, the housekeeper, through speaking Japanese better than she could in French. Amelie is in the midst of a natural cultural recovery because she lives in Japan as someone Belgian in blood. The bulk of this film takes place in 1970, but includes stark references to World War II, despite how long ago it was. Nishio-san and the landlady Kashima-san are the two prominent Japanese figures in the film. We could see two ways of combating warfare traumas through how these fictionalized characters were presented, and I thought the film strung this together fantastically. Nishio-san was a young child who survived through a devastating attack, and Kashima-san was the same, although much older and had an aristocratic family of her own. Kashima-san retorts very little in the film, but is bitter and repulsive towards Amelie's family only because of their Belgian heritage. Belgium was in direct opposition to Japan in the war. Nishio-san, being much younger, rejects her seclusion and bitterness through expressing love and respect towards the family, keeping the decades-past politics away from the children so that they live more healthy. I was so impressed they delved into her specific traumas in such a way that expressed vulnerability, but a strong courage and healing by focusing on the present moment. It's incredibly difficult to confront trauma, and this film never attempts to provide a clear-cut solution at all. It does, however, open conversations and provides examples in healing wounds through mercy and time. I really loved the portrayal of Nishio-san in this film. I found her more of a mother figure than Amelie's own mother. I actually saw the parents quite distant from their children. Nishio-san is such a positive figure. It made sense that she was actually a mother of her own around the time of this film. She exudes patience and grace, and raises Amelie with a kind smile and keen guidance. The relationship between Amelie and Nishio-san is the strongest and supports the focus of this film. The directors had expressed that Nishio-san was Amelie's gateway into Japanese customs and heritage, and further symbolizes Amelie's connection to growing up in Japan in of itself. The visuals have a painterly touch to them, while still appearing so clean and sleek. Compared to the explosion of gouache 3D paint textures within the Wild Robot, Little Amelie is simpler and does not demand for such action, partially because it was produced in 2D. The picture edit is rendered with a more rounded tip. It cleverly uses simplification instead of aperture to establish depth and surrounding in its backgrounds. I'm in awe that they pulled off so many scenic shots in the film, because while the visualization is certainly simplistic, the natural elements cannot be fabricated without a keen eye. There are so many precise strokes that would have to paint the environment, and I'm so delighted with the final visual balance. When painting an object, you have to take into consideration its reflection, erosion, season, texture, state, and more. Not only had the unique visual style been striking to me, but I was also floored with how smart the visual framing had been in the most pivotal sequences of the film. For a film said to be focused on the quality of its narrative and adaptation, the visuals were never considered a loose afterthought by the scriptwriters, but instead a vessel that can be used to build a larger world within the story. The film uses lighting and coloring splendidly. Many technical techniques and real-world observations allowed the visual effect artists to astutely mimic unique lens flares and light refractions for each scene. The rigidness or softness of the lights can depend on the mood of the scene. The visuals are codependent on its narrative and carry just as much weight. I've already mentioned the scene where Amelie parts the sea, but there are many more sequences that use this artistic medium as its life form to present its world in a unique light. Again, this narrative could only work in an animated film. The creative artist within me wonders what software was used for character animation and background work. Vector software, like Adobe Animate, are almost out of the question, because all outlines in this film are slightly textured at their tapers and edges so that they look fuzzy. But my prediction was proven wrong, as the 2015 film Long Way North, in which Lian Shohan and Maurice Valade had contributed to as storyboard artists, was said to be entirely produced within the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. In that case, vectors aren't entirely out of the equation. I just want to leave an update that the animation studio behind this movie actually got back to my email. It turns out that they animated the whole thing with Adobe Animate. That's so incredible! I use the same software in my work, and I just wonder how they got that painterly look down. It's hard to believe it was some compositing effect in After Effects, or simply just the rough texturization work within the software alone. I still have so many questions! The soundtrack within Little Amelie is a vibrant mix of traditional instruments for the past, orchestral instruments for the present, and ambience, which could be subjective. Composed by Japanese musician Mari Fukuhara ever since the 2021 proof of concept film, she brings an incredibly dynamic backdrop that supports and culminates the feelings of curiosity, splendor, and magnitude. I've actually been using a mix of the soundtrack as the background music to this video. A delicate mix of playful piano and sweeping strings lay the groundwork for the bulk of the backdrop in this film. There is a weight and beauty to this simple, yet surrounding sound. An occasional harp and trumpet convey tones of elegance and power, and the marimba, flutes, and percussive elements are but a carefree sound of childhood. In fact, the instruments have very subtle connections to the characters and themes. Amelie's brother, Andre, has a percussive backbeat. Both Nishio-san and Kashima-san tell stories in plucked Japanese strings, although varying in mood and complexity. And nature and memory flourish in one harmonious symphony. The ethereal pad synths dwindling the tune flourishes like the sound of stars, and distant choirs communicate more polarizing and complex feelings. A limbo stasis where time is infinite or fleeting, a contemplative moment, or a moment of rapture. The choir, whenever it would show itself, was grand and mysterious, only to repeat over and over again. A deus ex machina or a cultic, collective acclaim, especially in moments when the titular figure sought herself as a higher power. All in all, the soundtrack is yet another beautiful and unique element that adds to the complexity of this world. Forgive my long-winded discussion, but it was all worth it to exclaim that Little Amelie is one of my favorite films of the year, and I truly believe that it will reach far and wide. English and Polish dubs for the film had already been produced and used in some audience screenings, and I think that's super great news! Independent and global animation has been flourishing in recent years. The accolade sweep of Flow has been a milestone celebrated by many lovers of animation. Interestingly, you would be able to compare so much between the successes of both Flow and Little Amelie, if you were curious. How both films premiered at the Cannes Festival, won the Audience Award at Annecy, and had their North American premiere at TIFF. The list goes on. My point is that there is a growing interest in global films like these, and it's great that they're becoming more readily accessible and mainstream in recent years. Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, is unlike anything I've seen this year. It's able to capture such a unique experience with such a strong narrative and appreciation of many cultures. The animated lens brings the stories of Amelie Notham's early life in full swing and visualizes the many delicacies of a year in infancy. Every element in craftsmanship, in storytelling, and in pure intention is nothing short of incredible. And I'm so excited to see what these creative teams do in their future works. Thank you so much for bringing this film to the silver screens.